In 2001, the Library of Congress selected the 1948 horror comedy Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein for preservation in the National Film Registry. But initially there was a lot of reluctance from the actors. They didn't think that the mix of horror and comedy would work. Plus, the successful Universal monster movie franchises were running out of steam. Abbott and Costello were a comedic team in the 1940s and 50s, and at one point, two of the highest paid entertainers in the world. They first worked together in 1935 in New York City, and a lot of their early work was in radio. In 1940, Universal Studios signed them to their first movie, One Night in the Tropics. In 1945, however, the two were close to splitting up due to infighting and other personal issues. And by 1948, their popularity was fading. Robert Arthur, a former writer and associate producer of MGM musicals, came up with a movie script that involved Frankenstein's monster, Count Dracula, the Wolfman, the Mummy, Dracula's son named Count Alucard, and the Invisible Man. The Mummy, Dracula's son, and the Invisible Man were later taken out of the script, with one small exception. On reading an early script titled The Brain of Frankenstein, Lou Costello said, "You don't think I'll do that crap, do you? My 5-year-old daughter can write something better than that." But he and Abbott were offered a large payday and some rewrites were done. So they had Abbott and Costello on board. Now they needed to cast the monsters. They wanted to get the actors who made these monsters famous in the movies, Bela Lugosi, Lon Chaney, and Boris Karloff. But Karloff vowed never to appear as the monster again after 1939's Son of Frankenstein. However, the studio had Glenn Strange under contract, who played the monster role in as many Frankenstein movies as Karloff did. Lugosi spoke positively about the role, saying that he was glad that the script was not unbecoming to Dracula's dignity and that all I have to do is frighten the boys. A perfectly appropriate activity, my trademark will be unblemished. But Lugosi's career was on the downside, and his agent had to convince the producers to hire him. Lon Chaney was acting in a play at that time and accepted the role. Lenore Aubert and Jane Randolph played the female love interests. Neither Abbott or Costello were happy working on the project, and they fought with the director. They would leave during shooting and not show back up or spend days playing cards on set. There was one accident on set when Strange was supposed to throw a woman through a window. An invisible wire was attached to her to help him lift her, but when she was thrown, she swung back. He tried to catch her, fell, and broke his foot. As this injury was being treated, Chaney portrayed the monster throwing her through the window. So for the trivia buffs, although he didn't like this movie, this was Lon Chaney's final Wolfman performance. He is the only actor to play both Frankenstein and the Wolfman in the same movie, and he's the only actor who played all 4 of the Universal classic monsters in other movies. Special effects for this film were developed by David Horsley and Jerome Ash, which included the bats that could be seen in the eyes of one of the women and the animation that transformed Lugosi into a bat. The plot is pretty basic. The Abbott and Costello characters work as baggage clerks, and they are hired to deliver crates to a castle. At the castle, Dracula needs to find a better brain for Frankenstein, and he decides on Lou Costello's. The Wolfman knows what's going on. He's trying to convince Bud and Abbott that they need to stop Dracula. Costello is strapped down and about to have his brain removed. Chaos breaks out among the monsters, and they have a big fight, and some of the scenes are every bit as good as you would get from straight-up monster movies at that time. The monsters all die. Bud and Abbott escape in a rowboat, but that rowboat was brought there by one final character that wanted to be part of the fun, the Invisible Man. And as a side note, the Invisible Man was voiced by an uncredited Vincent Price. I've watched this quite a few times, and I think the gothic horror atmosphere of the Dark Castle is effective, and the comedy still works. The film went on to become the most successful film in the Frankenstein series since the release of the original 1931 movie. Universal paid Boris Karloff to pose outside of Criterion Theater in New York. Karloff agreed to this, stating, "As long as I don't have to see the movie." As for a few examples of the state of the horror genre at that time, this film was initially banned in British Columbia, and then later allowed for release after most of the scenes involved the Wolfman were removed. In Finland and Australia, nearly all the scenes with a monster in it were removed. And while not many had faith in the script or film, with a final production cost of $793,000, the film made $3.2 million. The Abbott and Costello team only lasted a few more years after this movie, as Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis became the next big thing in comedy teams in the 1950s. Good night.
What's the matter?
I know you'll think I'm crazy, but in a half an hour the moon will rise and I'll turn into a wolf.
You and 20 million other guys.
Listen. Back. Yes, master.
He thinks I'm Dracula.
Boo.